directly on its head. It goes to local communities like White Center and Seattle, Tukwila, and Rainier Valley, and sits down with them and says, what do you need? Tell us what you think defines a strong, vibrant community. And it's very hard to scale. It's inherently letting go and empowering. And we then learn things from those communities that help us discern what are the policy strategies that we need to go from a systems perspective advocate. So, yeah, traditional private sector approaches to trying to aggregate that world more effectively, I don't think work. Ye nonprofit reader.
You think this fragmentation problem is endemic to our region or American cities in general, or?
Here's, when I talk to people like our Brookings Institute folks who do this work, do their work all over the country in those other regions, and I ask them what's different about Seattle, they all say the same thing very quickly. And it's some version of, in most other regions, there's a table where things get done. Sometimes it's led by an iconic elected, sometimes it's led by a business person or group of business people, sometimes it's political party led. But there's some, in many regions, there's some orienting power structure. It's not always good. I mean, Seattle used to have one. It was 12 white guys at the Rainier Club who would have lunch every Monday and sit around and go, what does the community need? You know, they weren't all like some horrific Batman movie villains. Like they were born of a desire to do the right thing for the community and use their positions and their wealth and their influence to do that. But yes, it was racist and exclusive, and it was all their ideas about what was needed. But if there was a hospital that we needed to build, those guys got that done. Say, you go get the money, you call the governor, you get doctors from Chicago, hospital. That no longer exists, and the feedback is our region is super fragmented.
Right.
Super fragmented. So in our role, trying to be a honest broker, a humble servant leader organizationally, to fight fragmentation and to bust silos is an important opportunity.
It's like an incredible problem.
Yeah, it's a very tricky one. I was a history and philosophy double major in college, which is why my father had to hand me the help wanted section when he was to get a job. And what I studied, what I focused on in my history major was urban American political machines. I actually wrote my thesis about it, and I got my mother looking for it in the attic of their house because the fact that I'm now imbued in this is kind of interesting. And the answer, I don't think, is a new table. The answer is how do you stitch networks?
Right.
You know, for a community as complicated as ours, you know, you've got old Seattle and new Seattle, which are kind of like oil and water. Yeah, that don't know the other exists, or they don't care that the other exists. And you've got this weird East Side thing. Like that's an especially weird thing because there are many other communities that geographically have far more complicated divisions of waters and ways, and they don't have that, but we have that. We've got that pioneering. We're the East Side, or we're Seattle, and they're the other. That is the holy grail. How do you fight that fragmentation? Because we got all the assets.
Right.
So that problem statement of assets versus disparities says at least some major percent of the problem statement is a failure of leadership driven by a fragmentation.
And accepting the reality that we have big city problems.
We have big city problems.
Right, like that's part of the fragmentation is we are the East Side, we are South King County, but
we have big region problems.
right.
If you were to actually look at us correctly, we're kind of 4 counties from a regional perspective. But you talk to the county executive about this. When the King County governmental system was structured, it was structured at a time when the legislature was worried about railroads taking control. And so they intentionally decentralized the governmental structure of King County such that there are 160 different governments in King County. And you wonder why there is uneven distribution of services, of basic needs, of coordination. I'd fix that before I'd fix the nonprofit thing.
Well, you compare that to Singapore, which started existing as a government 51, 52 years ago, when they studied these models and can come up with policies to exactly change that curve and make the investment. And they actually, my brother lives there, so I've been there a few times, but they actually sort of, instead of, I don't know what the right word is, but taking advantage of, like Singapore will take advantage of the rich expat community to service their most in need. And I feel like that is kind of the opposite in the United States, at least it's going in that direction.
It's a very tricky time. It's a very tricky, I mean, if you haven't read Nick Hanauer's The Pitchforks Are Coming, yeah, it's worth reading. It's, I am optimistic because we have all of the assets, and we actually have, I think, the right intention. But operationalizing it, actually rewriting that playbook, and there's a trick to getting the private sector to see the math on this. There's a trick to what happens at the legislative level. Neither innovation nor revenue is really coming from the federal government right now in any meaningful way. So when I talk to my colleagues who have my position in other regions, and they are talking to their electeds and they're talking to their CEOs just like I am, we're all sort of feeling like kind of on our own locally.
Right.
And we're learning more from each other locally than we are from any top-down model of what's happening at a state or a federal level. And I think that the country will continue to evolve that way. Cities, regions are what matter. It's an interesting time. But depending upon the results of the election, we can secede from the Union as Cascadia and create
There you go.
a city-state that does exactly what Singapore does. And I'm right behind you.
But that doesn't seal the fragmentation.
No, I mean, all joking aside, the three classic fumbles we see in the philanthropy space is underestimation of a problem, therefore underinvestment. Intervention versus prevention and reinvention.
Right.
And what we call flying solo. So if you're an iconic billionaire and you've created some amazing thing, and you have a lot of confidence in your ability to solve a problem, well, you look at the world and you say, I'm going to solve opportunity youth, or I'm going to solve the education problem, and it always ends up the same. And we've got to figure out a way to partner with each other more effectively, which is core work that we do. But there's also new promising things called, things like Challenge Seattle. Some of the Nintendo CEO is on the Challenge Seattle team. 15, 17 global CEOs who are getting together on a quarterly basis, led by former Governor Gregoire, and advised by organizations, including ours, that think about what is the role of private sector against these problems.
So that's a nice segue to the next question about relationships between nonprofits and businesses. And you've touched on this a little bit, but what are ways that businesses can contribute to the broader vision of a healthy community that the Seattle Foundation envisions beyond contributing on giving?
Oh, I mean, if every business in our region had a reasonable dedication to applying its strength and innovation to the challenges that we have as a community, we'd be poolside. I mean,